Okay, before I introduce today's guest, and I'm excited, I've been thinking about this for the last week since we've had a conversation. I had dinner with a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, probably about 2 weeks ago. And every time we sit down, these poor doctors, and these guys do work a lot. I mean, I was trying to do the math on, he said I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. And we go for dinner. There's a little restaurant at our place, which is called Joey's, which is very popular across Canada now. And we're sitting down, and I had a beer. He had two quick beers, and he looked at me and he said, "Get me out of here. This country is broken. The medical system in Canada is broken. I need to move away. My friends are telling me I can go to Portugal and I could live like a king." And I said to him, and I brought this book up a couple of times to him, and now this time I followed through and I bought him a copy of it. But today's guest is the quote I used to this good friend of mine was, "So what you're saying is take your money and run." And he says, "That's exactly it." So in 1994, I think it was 1996, because I think the book was written in 1994, I read a book called Take Your Money and Run, and it was written by Alex Doulis. And I buy a copy of this book for this good friend of mine. And I started thinking about it. I thought, you know what? Wouldn't that be great to get Alex on our show? It's based on tax. And I really want to talk to this guy because there hasn't been one time. There's been a probably since I started in the as a portfolio manager in this industry in the early 1990s. The way that I deal with tax is I work harder. What a stupid thing that is. Ask my wife and my family. So today's guest is Alex Doulis, and he wrote a book called Take Your Money and Run. And I am so excited to have a conversation with Alex. I'm sure an hour is not going to be good. Is not going to be long enough, Alex. So welcome to the Snowbird US Day Tracker podcast, which we like to call Snowbird's Expat Radio Podcast. So thank you for your time, and tell us something about what Alex has been up to.
Well, I'm the dealer on this concept, first off, of asset protection. And secondly, financial freedom, in that I believe that what you earn is yours. And I also believe that once you've earned it, you're entitled to keep it. So the books have been very much oriented towards that. Take Your Money and Run was about how you could determine what your tax liability versus payment and loss of assets could be, because you would determine where you lived. Subsequent books were very much on the concept of asset protection and understanding our tax system in Canada. One book was personal, and that was Lost on Bay Street. Tommy Caldwell at the Eponymous firm says it's one of the best books ever written about the current history of Bay Street. And talking about bestsellers, at last report, Take Your Money and Run was approaching 200,000 copies sold. And bear in mind that in Canada, if you sell 5,000 books, it's a Canadian bestseller. The book was so notorious that it was raised in the House of Commons sometime in the very late 90s. And a member said, "Look at what's happening in this country. This guy is telling people how to get out of Canada and the tax system because of the tax system." So it became notorious.
Isn't that something? So my understanding is that you're from Vancouver. You lived in Victoria for a very short period of time, and then you just had enough and you left. And would that be in your 50s, Alex, that you just said, you know what, reading the book, you went sailing for 15 years?
Gerry, what happened was I was at Gordon Capital, which was a very, very profitable Canadian firm. And when I looked at what was being reported to me as my income and what I actually had in my pocket, I was disgusted. So I told my partners at a meeting, hey, I'm going to be 50 in June. I'm out of here. And one of my partners said, Alex, do you know how much money you're leaving on the table? My response, Gerry, was money is infinite. Time is finite. I know how much time I may have. I'll never know how much money I'm going to bring off the table. And so, it was 1990. My wife and I went to Amsterdam and began our non-residency. On June 5th, 1990, I set sail from Fort Lauderdale, where we had bought an ocean-going yacht, and sailed to the Mediterranean. And we spent 15 years in the Med. We were residents of Ireland, but hadn't been there except for the first 4 months we were out of the country, which is one of the things I should mention, Gerry, which is very important. There are two very important issues for me. One is that Revenue Canada has a rule on residency, which says you're not a resident someplace else, or you're not a non-resident of Canada until you are a resident somewhere else, which is critical because that was designed to kind of cool Canadians off. They thought if they just left the country, they were now non-residents. But no, they had to actually establish a new residence. And the other thing which is very important in the book is, most of the things are, your RRFP. If you leave Canada and become a non-resident, you have to sever all your ties with Canada and document that in a form called NR73. But you are not required to take out your RRSP. So let's look at it. My marginal tax rate when I left in 1990 was 65%. My RRSP was worth about $1 million. If I had taken it out as a resident of Canada, I would have paid the marginal rate and ended up with $350,000. However, as a non-resident of Canada, I couldn't be taxed for the money as income. It had to be something else. So what did they do? They looked and said, well, yeah, there's a 25% withholding tax on money taken out of an RRSP by one of you damn foreigners. So the end result was I ended up with $750,000 rather than $35,000. All very legal, all above board. And remember, Gerry, counseling tax evasion is a crime. All of those books are about tax avoidance. Otherwise, I'd be speaking to you from Kingston Pen.
Okay. I was going to get you to kind of scan the room to see if that was just a fake backdrop, and there's actual bars.
Guard.
Yeah, exactly. I got to tell you, there's a part of me that wants to that is excited when I'm in the same position. I've been in the same industry as yourself. I love it. I love working for people. But at the same time, you have those RSPs that are $1 million plus. And I'm thinking, boy, what can I do here? We're going through a process right now, Alex, where we are going through the E2 visa process. We built these apps. We're in this cross-border space that we help Americans moving to Canada, which I don't get. When American says, hey, come on up to Canada, it's great. What do you have going for me? And I said, well, the only thing we got going for you is we don't have guns. I don't know what else to say. Yes, we have beautiful mountains and lakes and fresh water and 1/10 of the people. But did I mention we don't have guns? Because we have the same, a lot of the same issues as our friends to the south. So my question is that the big thing here is trying to get residency. And how do you go through that process to become a resident of another country? If in your case it was Ireland.
Well, in my time, Gerry, what happened was you would walk into the appropriate government office and make an application. And they would ask you for some documentation. In my case, my wife and I walked into the government office in Dublin. They wanted copies of our passports, some documentation for us to fill out. Mostly what they wanted to know was that you didn't have a criminal record, you weren't fleeing something, and then fine, you became a resident of Ireland. Now, what happened was my wife and I, Sally and I, lived in Dublin for about 4 months and then moved to Florida to buy the boat. So I never changed my residence. That's the important thing, Gerry. In the eyes of Canada, I'm still a resident of beautiful downtown Ireland.
Really?
So as long as I don't change my residency, I've still got it. Now, most countries will let you in as a resident if you can show you have self-support, assets to look after yourself, or income to look after yourself. Once you're past that hurdle, they're more than happy to have you, because then you may become a tax resident of their area. If you're not, if it's a country like the Bahamas, okay, so you show them $250,000 in assets, you move in, but by God, you're going to be paying sales tax, excise tax. It may not be a lot of money, but you're paying those taxes in Canada as well as your income tax. So other countries are more than happy to have you because they perceive you as a source of revenue. You're going to be living there, spending money. As long as you're not a drain on the society, they're more than happy to have you.
So what about a country like two countries come to mind? One would be Belize. We have friends of ours, clients of ours that actually live in Belize, but they're still Canadians. So can you just move there, become a resident of Belize? And I don't believe that they pay a lot of taxes because the government doesn't sound like they have. There's a lot of cash floating around Belize these days. But can you just be that citizen or resident of that area, and then you can depart Canada? Could that be possible in today's world?
You've mentioned in passing a very important point. Residency and citizenship are very different. You can give up your residency and not in any way impact your citizenship. Now, I don't know the exact situation in Belize, but I do know the situation in one of the other Caribbean countries, which is the Bahamas. If you move to the Bahamas and apply for residency, they're going to tell you to go out and buy yourself a $250,000 house. So what you've done is you've established that you have the money to live there. You're not going to become a drain on society, and you've got an asset anchor in the Bahamas. Now, to show you how deep that anchor is, Gerry, my host, when I first went down to Nassau, she and her late husband were living in Lyford Key, which was actually started by a Canadian, E.P. Taylor. So anyway, we were walking around through Lyford Key, and I'm looking at the driveways, the gateways. Rogers? Huh, that's odd. Massey? Monk? I was walking through the white pages of Canada's elite. There they were all living there, and no, they were residing. They spent their time somewhere. Maybe it was in Europe. Maybe it was in the United States. But for tax purposes, they were a resident of the Bahamas, which has no personal income tax. Now, bear in mind that the idea of personal income tax is that you should pay money to the place that provides you services. So that's a question of residency. The only country that doesn't abide by that standard is the United States, which taxes you on citizenship, which is irrational. What it's done is it's forced my wife to give up her U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, we have a lot of Americans that move up to Canada here, or a lot of Canadians that actually work down in the States for years. They had their green card. And I think the Canadians are getting smart enough now that they will hold on to that green card, but never ever apply for citizenship because they do want to come home one day. And when they come home, hopefully they've got those assets below 4 million as a couple. And well, 4 million isn't a lot of money nowadays, but there are strategies around that under $4 million coming back to Canada. But
you've just addressed two things. One is that with remote working now, I saw when I was down in the Turks and Caicos last, 3 or 4 guys writing software for companies in the US. People in the US didn't give a damn where you were writing. They just wanted the product, like any remote working situation. You mentioned the $4 million. Well, the other book I wrote, which you're aware of, is My Blue Haven. And My Blue Haven was written primarily around the concept of asset protection. Now, Gerry, if you had a couple of dozen maple leafs and you thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in a safe behind my picture over my mantle, you've now hidden your assets. What kind of a scoundrel are you, sir? Well, wait a minute. Don't hide them over the fireplace. Put them in the bank vault in Nassau. Well, what's the difference between the fireplace vault and Nassau? They're both behind a picture.
Yeah.
So Take Your Money and Run was about residency. My Blue Haven was about asset protection. Now, the problem with asset protection is if I go to the effort of hiding my assets from the mob, Revenue Canada, whomever, and then the assets make $60,000 last year. Now, the assets don't belong to me. The assets are behind the picture. So if I go and tell CRA that this money was earned, they're going to say, well, where and how? And now I have to tell them about the assets. So rather than that, you put the assets in somebody else's name, put them in a nice, secure place, and say, forget about it. So your people who are faced with the problem of having assets over a limit, simple answer is read My Blue Haven and find out which haven you want to look at.
And I have that on my list here is My Blue Haven. And I have a lot of reading to do because already I have a lot of reading, but now there's a couple of books that I'm willing to jump into. Now, how are you now you're back in Toronto? Am I allowed to say that where you are these days? Am I going to get you in trouble, or are you wanted by anybody or CRA?
Well,
are you?
I have been harassed. One of the most bizarre ones was the Ontario Securities Commission, working on whose behalf, I don't know, decided that they would do an inquiry into me and then have a hearing. And then now they really had me because they had racked up $500,000 in costs. Brilliant. Mr. Doulis, send me a check for I think it was 400 and some odd thousand. I said, I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of money and I don't have that kind of assets. Well, what do you mean you don't have any assets? I said, I've only got my wristwatch and my gold cufflinks. So I started to chuckle and they started to cry.
Yeah.
They'd blown $500,000 without looking at first to see whether or not they'd be able to collect it. Make assumptions, see?
So now that you're back in Toronto and are you a resident now of Canada, or you're a citizen?
I'm a resident of Canada, yes.
Okay.
I resumed my residency in 2005.
Okay.
But literally, Gerry, I don't own anything. I was very fortunate in that when I came back to Canada just before establishing my residency, a trust in Turks and Caicos gave me a lot of money, and I put that into an annuity. The reason being, if you look at the Canada Annuity Act, those things are bulletproof, nuclear proof. You can't do anything with them. Yeah. And it's a return of capital, so it's non-taxable. My taxable income last year was $17,000, which was the interest that had been earned by the annuity. So, yeah, I'm now a resident of Canada. Um, Nobody at CRA will speak to me. I don't get invited to anything of theirs. And the Ontario Securities Commission, well, they gave me a great compliment. I wrote a book called Decommissioned, and I described this process that they had used to be able to run this fake inquiry into my affairs. So anyway, one of their lawyers read it and said, holy shit, this tells people the mistakes that the Ontario Securities Commission made in going after Doulis. So he copied the book and circulated it as a manual within the OSC. As a result of an access to information application, I found it. And I got an offer of settlement from the OSC of $5,000 for copyright infringement. I've not taken them up on that because that $5,000 is worth more advertising than I could buy.
Yeah, exactly. So do you find now that, and of course, if I was living in Toronto, and I'm actually going to be in Toronto on October the 11th, we go through what is it called, an interview with the US Embassy in Toronto. We're going through the E2 visa process. I haven't got everything figured out, but I do know that I want to spend more time in Maui and through the E2 visa because of the apps. We're going to spend more time over there. But if I was your neighbor, I'd be calling you up every day and just trying to gather as much information as I can. How do I take my money and run? And is it still possible today? Do you find people are noticing you and saying, Alex, help us out here? Because I'll tell you, we've got so many of these high net worth people in Vancouver and across the country are saying, get me out of here. So how does it look like today? Is it? I would think when you did it in the you came back in 2005, so you would have done this early 1990s. Is it still possible? Are you still seeing a lot of Canadians organizing themselves?
Gerry, the book is still selling like wildfire.
Well, that's because I
And
bought four last week.
I have, anyway, I have seen an awareness in Canadians of the tax system, how it works, why it is so damaging, so painful. So what people do now is they get out of their Canadian residency, first thing. And to have done that, they have to establish a residency someplace else. Now, you take my case, Gerry. I have noticed I like Dublin. I was more than happy to spend 4 months there. But my residency up until 2005 with Ireland, although I spent less than 180 days on many occasions in places like Turkey, France, Italy, Greece. As long as I didn't violate, I'm not sure what the immigration acts are in those countries, but in most jurisdictions, if you spend more than 180 days, they can declare you resident for tax purposes. So take your case. You want to spend some time in Hawaii. Well, become a resident of Ireland. Spend your 180 days there in a calendar year. And then, hey, take some time off and go to Cannes. Go to Acapulco. Visit some friends in Puerto Vallarta. And then once your calendar year is up, bingo, you're available to do another 180 days in Hawaii.
It's interesting because, as I think through our process, we are not, yes, we will be able to become residents of Maui through the E2 visa. And I always thought it was citizenship because I know the E2 visa does not lead to citizenship in the United States, which is a good thing because who wants to file US tax returns for the rest of their life? So the main thing is just becoming a resident. And I'll tell you, when I said I was excited to talk to you, I'm downplaying it because you're answering all my questions, and yeah, this has been a lot of fun. So, question now is, when you came back to Canada after being 15 years on the road, the Willie Nelson, Toronto Mike is a real music guy, so everything's related to music as we speak. So, when you came back to Canada, was it a difficult process for you to come back and no issues whatsoever? Because you are a Canadian citizen, you never lose that.
Exactly. Exactly, Gerry. I might as well have been away on a 3-week holiday. I walked back home, here I am. And the next question was, are you going to be a resident of Ontario or where? Because we have to know who's going to take up your health care.
Okay. Okay. Now, what did you do for healthcare when you were on the road at sea for 15 years? Just don't get sick?
So when I did the research into why my take home wasn't moving up as fast as my top line income, I found that in the year 1987, I had paid $8,000 and what for healthcare in Canada. That was if you took the Canadian population and divided it into the healthcare expenditures, you came up with $8,000. Wow, it's up to 17 now. So anyway, I realized I had to have some kind of healthcare, and I realized that in Europe, this was not unknown. So I applied and took a policy with a company called Private Patients Plan in the UK. It's now run by AXA Insurance out of France. But anyway, I paid $2,700 for myself, $2,700 for my wife. What we were entitled to was not health care, but $1.5 million a year in hospital care. You think, Gerry, what are you going to do with $1.5 million? One heart transplant, a liver, 2 kidneys, and I think I'll throw in a lung. Am I to my $1.5 million yet? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, one of the humorous parts of this was, so, you know, Gerry, think about it. You've got your $1.5 million of hospital care. You've got a pain in the neck. You go and see a doctor, you pay him $50. Yeah, who cares? It's when you step into the hospital, that emergency room, that intensive care unit, that hospital, that recovery room, that's where the bills, that's where they start occurring. But a humorous one for you. I'd met a guy in Turkey sailing, and he invited me, he was an American, and he invited me and Sally to visit, he and his wife, in St. Petersburg, Florida. So we went there, and I tore my Achilles tendon playing tennis. So when we got out of Emerge, question was which hospital to go to it. And Sally said, wait. She said, all of your medical records are in Canada. Cheap flights to Toronto, let's take a shot up there. So we arrive in Toronto. I hobble off the airplane and into Mount Sinai Hospital. Doctor looks at it, and he says, my God, he says, I can't even stitch this. We're going to have to replace it. And Sally says, well, when can we get that done? And he goes to the Rolodex and he says, it's a 6-month wait. Sally said, well, that's odd. She says, we don't have any OHIP. Said, what? No, we have no OHIP. Oh, she says, here's my card, my private patients plan card. Oh, cash customers? Yeah. Let me see here. Can you come in on Thursday? And honest to God, it was a week later, I had my Achilles tendon operated on, and I'm sure that they wanted to keep me as long as possible, as long as they had that card in their hand. But anyway,
boy.
it goes to show you the difference. So yeah, you can get very good hospital insurance in the UK. The reason I chose the UK versus a plan that came out in Denmark is in the UK, their legislation on insurance is very strict. Once Private Patients Plan had me as a client, no matter how big a bill I racked up in any year, they could not increase my rates. Once I had signed on, as long as I continued to pay my premium at the same level as everybody else in my age bracket, guess what? They had to keep me. So I like the idea, because we would be sailing, of not having to get into some kind of conflict about my insurance, which I had out of the UK. The program out of Denmark was, at that time, a company called IHS, and they offered a little better coverage, I thought, and that there were a few other things than just the straight hospital care. But so I mean, think of it, Gerry. It's 1990, and you're paying $2,700 US for all the hospital care you could ever ingest. So it's very, it's very different.
That's the first question people are going to ask is always going to be healthcare. What happens if I get sick? I can't stop. I'm chuckling inside because my wife wants to go to Europe, so that gets checked off the box. And knowing that, and I'm gonna continue to follow up on this, and I look forward to many conversations with yourself, because we still got 4 or 5 different books we get to cover in this time we're speaking now. But that's the first question people ask is healthcare, and isn't that something that you're able to get your healthcare, get your operation? Tennis player, pickleball is where people are now tearing their Achilles. They're giving up their tennis, playing pickleball. And I could probably mention some of the guys that I grew up playing tennis with that were always older than myself. Guys like Ray Lowen from the Lowen Group. I'm sure that name rings a bell. He was a
Lowen and Dachi McCutcheon. In fact, Chris Lowen is in fact in the Bahamas.
Okay, well, Ray Lowen was the founder of the Lowen Group. He was a BC guy. Actually, he was from, I want to say he's originally from one of the Prairie provinces. But I played a lot of tennis with him, and he went through a really difficult time with SC Corp. Was it SC Lavalin? No, it was big funeral home company in the States, and they took them down. But I had played a lot of tennis with Ray, and we talked a lot of stories about what he went through. And when he was that big taxpayer, he was everybody's best friend, and then you lose it all and you don't pay a lot of taxes. But the point I want to make is healthcare is that biggest thing that we ask, and boy, you answered that question. And even the idea of coming back to Canada and using annuity. But let's move on to
Gerry, let me interrupt. A very important point. My plan with private patients covered me anywhere in the world except Japan and the United States.
That is good to know. Another question I had for you is, tell me more about your book called The Bond Revenge.
Which one?
It's called The Bond Revenge.
The Bond's Revenge was prompted by the death of a good friend of mine and his widow. And what happened was, I'm not sure if, trying to remember the guy's name, Tom Stanley. When my friend died, Tom put her in a bond portfolio. because she was a 58-year-old widow.
Mhm.
And Tom had made that couple a lot of money, a lot of money. They were up to $5 million. So a bond portfolio for this lady would be very comfortable. But I was worried about the performance of the bond market versus the stock market because I was concerned that she would be comfortable. And what I found was that over any long-term period, the real return in the stock market, in the US market, is 6.1% over any 40-year period. The corporate bond market, on the other hand, gave you 5.25%. So for me, the idea of this lady not having to read the Wall Street Journal every morning and sitting there with a portfolio of triple A's or double A's had to be a winner. So I explain in that book the difference between the two markets and what they offer for the retiree.
Now, do you find when was that book written?
That was written around,
Was it the early 90s?
no, mid-90s.
Okay, mid 90s. Because a lot, and I have a lot of friends in Toronto that are bond fund managers, and of course, how these managers are functioning now is it's not about buying a bond and having it mature. They're doing all kinds of crazy things, and it's just out of this world. I like to think, being in the industry for 30 years and being a portfolio manager, I would be able to understand what these guys are saying. But some of it is, Alex, it's over my head. It's just I don't get it. And of course, nobody likes bonds the last 3 or 4 years. But we do have a great bond trader at our firm, and I won't mention any names because I'm presenting myself as Gerry Scott, Snowbird US Day Tracker, so I don't want any conflicts. But we have really taken a serious look at bonds, and when I say serious look, we're participating in the bond market because it seems like there's this incredible opportunity over the next couple of years with bonds trading at a discount, capital gains, interest income, and very predictable over the next 2 years. And I think if you look at the stock market, it could be very unpredictable over a 2 year period. That's kind of the way I look at it. So, and that kind of, you had another book that I thought had a really cool title to it. It said High Yields for High Heels. That's almost the same story, isn't it?
So what happens is 2005, I come back to Canada, and a lot of my friends had died, and they left behind these widows. And one widow came up to me and said, Alex, why do I only have $3 million now, whereas I started with 5? How did this happen? Well, over the last year. I said, no, you're all wrong. She was, I hate to put it in this terms, but women and financial statements.
Yeah. Okay.
She gave me the financial statements for the year. This guy had done 47 trades in this account in 1 year. What had happened was, if he had been in the bond market, the firm got taken over by a larger firm, an American firm. They saw, well, bond market, how many trades a day does she do in that? So anyway, I took it up with the OSC. I said, well, these things happen, Took it up with IROC. Well, that's the risks you have in the market. I said, wait a minute, 47 trades in a 58-year-old widow's account in 1 year? Well. So anyway, I took it to the ombudsman for banking services and investments. He got her a $45,000 settlement against the broker. So what High Yields for High Heels does is it warns women that they have to learn about their investments before their husbands die. And more importantly, I point out in the book that the husbands have the responsibility to teach their wives about investments. What is yield? What is a dividend? What's the difference between dividends and earnings? These people have to know that because they are going to outlive their husbands. So High Yields for High Yields takes off and says, the very start is, you probably are now with a firm, well-known investment firm called Stuffing and Churnham. And I explained to them what stuffing is, what churning is, and how you should be aware of the broker who has to earn a living, is out to maximize his earnings, and you are the source of his revenue. So a number of people were very excited about this book. And then a lady broker I know, very successful, and she ordered a box of books from me, which she gave out titles to her female clients, and then asked them what they had learned. And this stockbroker comes back to me, this lady stockbroker, and her exact words were, Alex, a woman would rather clean an oven than read a book about finance.
Yeah, so true.
And it's sad, but it's sad because if their husbands really cared, they'd teach them how to change a tap washer and how to change a portfolio position and why and when to do it.
It brings up so much about our industry, and as much as I love doing what I do. I mean, I love the relationships with the individual people, and we've experienced the husbands passing away, even the wives passing away before the husbands, and we have such a responsibility to not only educate these people, but everything we do, may it be discretionary, may it be the costs that we charge people. I always tell the story when new clients come on board is that my father was a truck driver. My mother was a chambermaid. They worked hard for their money. And I've always had sensitivity towards the fees that we charge. But at the same time, we know what the industry is charging. We know what we're charging, what we're providing. But I think our industry does have a lot of bandits. We use the term screw them, do them, and how along the same ways. I mean, it really is. And when you mentioned it was a large U.S. firm coming into Canada, I'm going to say Merrill Lynch. I will name who the other firm was. I know who it is. Am I right to say it was Merrill Lynch that came into Canada? Do you remember?
No, it's much more recent. Merrill has been in and out of Canada about 3 times now.
Yes.
But you mentioned about the bad actors in our business. I was in the business. I was the top-ranked mining analyst in Canada in 1980. I was recruited into a boutique firm. And when I went to see the senior partner, I asked him, well, what kind of a firm are you starting here? He said, a brand new firm. I said, what kind? He said, a firm of Greeks. And he said, I've got a Greek, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I said, yes. And one of the things that struck me, I don't know if he was aware of this, but I was working for a firm, and here I am, the top ranked mining analyst, and they won't make me a partner or a director, although I owned a big chunk of stock in that old WASP firm. So anyway, I said to this guy, I said, well, that's wonderful. I said, how are you going to do that? Or I said, what are you going to do with this firm? And I'm looking for the exit sign now, the big red exit sign, so I can get out of there. This guy's nuts. So he said, I'm going to take over the institutional stock business in Canada. I said, oh, where is that sign? I said, how are you going to do that? He says, I have a secret weapon. Oh, am I going to get out of here alive? I said, what's your secret weapon? He said, facilitate the client. I said, what? You're going to have a firm that works for the client? He said, yes. I said, how much do I have to put up and where do I sign?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty good. Now, getting back, talking about your book, High Yield for Heels. Do you think that book would be a lot more successful today? Like if you had the successful broker back in when she did buy the book, I don't sure how many years ago, but do you think today women would take it a lot more seriously? I hope that their things have changed and they would be more inclined to want to read and to learn. Because we're always looking for more women advisors so they can relate to these clients. Do you think it's just it's more favorable today? You would hope so.
Yeah. Gerry, I would really hope, I gave boxes of the books to Tommy Caldwell, to other firms, because I really wrote it as a
guide, as
a
a
guide.
survivor guide. Yeah.
Yeah, a survivor's guide. Because, the book starts off and tells the reader how securities originated. Where did they come from? And then guides them through what those securities meant for the people who owned them. And I don't think I've ever had anybody criticize the book to me, except one person said that maybe if I titled it something different rather than High Yields for High Heels, it might have struck more of a chord with ladies. But I think today it's still a little premature. I think women are becoming more and more aware of the fact that they are on an equal footing with men and that they should have the same knowledge as their male counterparts. Because if a lady can be a VP sitting next to another VP, why can't she run her portfolio the same way he does?
Interesting. And I think what I see when people, when the book itself and making sure women are being educated, but there's always been this trend now where people just want to do everything themselves. And it seems like there's more emphasis on that. And I don't know if that's a way for these firms to become more profitable and cut that. Not all of advisors are valuable, but to cut out that advisors so that they could just give general information. And I don't know if I know that's not the answer, because
Gerry,
you need a good coach in today's world.
I instigated with these widows a system which I believe will protect them and form a very, very rational and reasonable investment industry. What I did was I took power of attorney on their accounts. And what I did was, working with peanut brokers, $10 broker in those days, I would buy them things which gave them a good yield. I never traded the account. I never bought anything to sell. I only bought it to provide them income. And again, what I noticed is they would never question. Now, I didn't make a commission. What I did was I charged them a fee of 1% of the value of the portfolio at year end. What this does, Gerry, is this orients me with the value of their portfolio. The bigger their portfolio is at the end of the year, the more money I'm going to make.
Yeah.
I don't have a big fancy office on the 54th floor of the TD Bank building I have to pay for. I don't have any back office staff I have to pay for. 1% is more than ample.
Yeah.
But that system, if it prevails, will destroy the banks. The banks, as far as investment advisory services for the man on the street, will be done.
Yeah.
So the OSC cannot allow that sort of thing to happen, because like every regulator, it's been captured by the people it regulates. CRTC, Transportation Safety Board, all of these things, although they're meant to regulate an industry, they actually assist the industry. So yeah, there it
Well,
all is.
I've always said that I will never sell my soul to the bank, and I've done a pretty good job. I'm 62 years of age, and I've avoided the banks my entire career, always on the independent side. And I believe in that model. I always tell people I'm not drinking the independent Kool-Aid. I'm actually swimming in it. I believe there's value as an independent and making sure these clients are looked after. Now,
There's more value, Gerry, because you do work for your employer is your client, not some guy in a corner office.
that's so true. Excuse me. The last thing I want to ask you, Alex, is how can people find the treaties out there? I know I put a link on here, and there must be some book out there. And there's another great book for you to say, write about all the treaties in very simple understanding. Because when you go onto the CRA website and you want to find out where Canada has a treaty with the following country, you have to have a law degree to understand and yet to understand all that literature on that 100-page document in the treaty that exists with Sweden or United States. That would be a great book, the handbook of treaties or something. How do you?
The problem is, those books are mostly, or those treaties are mostly meant to guide commercial interests. Very little emphasis is put on the individual because the tax authorities in foreign countries like Ireland, they weren't even interested in me because, I didn't earn any income in Ireland. Who's this guy? Who cares? If you can avoid the tax treaty completely, that's a better approach than trying to understand it. Because I'm with you. I don't think anybody can understand those things completely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Alex, I'll tell you, I know that I look forward to having another conversation. And when I am in Toronto, I look forward to when you talk about boating and sailing. I was a power squadron guy, so I grew up in Ucluelet on Vancouver Island. I know you know where that is because you're from Victoria. So I've been around boats my entire life, and knowing that I can now move to another country as a resident and take my money and run, and I could pass this on to this poor orthopedic surgeon client of mine that was. Like I say, the first two beers went down really quick, and then I got his attention when I was telling him about the book. So he's going to be excited that we have a little bit more knowledge and a great person that we can call up. But anyway, I want to thank you for your time today. I look forward to meeting you in person, and all the best to you and your wife. And please, I owe you dinner when you end up in Vancouver here one of these days, if you're allowed back.
Gerry, it's been a great pleasure for me because I am a proselytizer. My interest is that the man on the street get his just deserts from the taxation authorities and that he be as protected as he can be. And that's by giving me this platform, has probably opened up the eyes of a number of people on where they can get information that will simplify their position. And if they're interested in the books, they can get them at www.alexdoulis.com. They're all in print, and no leather-bound copies, though. Those went to Revenue Canada.
Well, I love the book. It's I carry a couple of books with me. One is called Americans Living in Canada, and this one is now in my backpack at all times. So, Alex, I really appreciate your time. I look forward to meeting you in person, and stay safe, and thank you very much.
We hope we can get together, Gerry. It's been a pleasure.